So, Josh, thanks very much for doing this. Where are we right now?
We are in Carmel, Fitzrovia. So we have two Carmel restaurants, one in Queen's Park, and this is our second branch in Fitzrovia, just on Marketplace, just by Oxford Circus.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So, what restaurants have you been involved with in your career to date?
Um, in any capacity or
Any
in
capacity?
launching. Well, I worked back in the day at a restaurant, Galvin Bistro on Baker Street. It's no longer there anymore. I worked at Ottolenghi, across the Ottolenghi group for several years. I worked at a restaurant at the Roundhouse called Made in Camden. Was my first head chef position. So yeah, a variety. And then obviously my own restaurants. We have Berber and Q. Was our first restaurant in 2015. Shawarma Bar on Exmouth Market was in 2016, and Carmel Queen's Park 2021, and Carmel Fitzrovia was this year.
Lovely. And so, how did you get into hospitality in the first place?
I was always into food, restaurants. I loved restaurants. I was actually had a bit of a later career change. I studied marketing. I did a master's in commerce and marketing, and instead of doing any study, I was actually in New South Wales, University of New South Wales in Sydney. But instead of doing any studying, I just spent my time eating in all the restaurants, working in a burger joint, and spending the money that I earned on eating in restaurants around Sydney. So I always had a love for sort of food and for restaurants, and then had a bit of a later career change. I think I was 26 at the time, so I didn't do your usual go in straight from school or earlier, straight in. Mine was a little bit later, and I started as a commis chef at Galvin Bistro on Baker Street. Yeah.
So, what was the inspiration for your first concept, Berber and Q?
Well, I've been working at Ottolenghi for several years. I was sort of quite into Middle Eastern cookery, Eastern Mediterranean. I was living off the Edgware Road. I lived there for about eight years. So I remember I'd work at Galvin Bistro, finish my shift, come home, and then go to one of the late night eateries on Edgware Road. So I was really getting into the sort of flavors of Middle Eastern cookery, Mediterranean cookery through my both where I was living and my time at Ottolenghi, um, and always had a sort of historical love for cooking over fire from when I was a kid. Spent a lot of my summers, or all my summers, in Canada. I have good close family friends over there, so I'd go there every year, and we just spent our summers camping and cooking over fire. So I always had a sort of a love for barbecue, cooking over fire, and I was doing a lot of travel also to New York around about the time that we launched Berber and Q. Um, so just yeah, a combination of all of these influences, sort of outdoor cookery, live fire cookery. I was the hospitality scene in New York. One of my favorite restaurants there at the time was a restaurant still there, a well-known barbecue restaurant called Fetty Sao. Um, and so I just wanted to bring all of these sort of the flavors of Middle Eastern cookery and my experience as a chef, with my personal experience of where I was living and uh, my experience, my childhood experiences. So that's how I conceived of the idea of Berber and Q. Was just a sort of a way of bringing all of those influences and inspirations together.
So, how have lessons learnt in your first endeavours translated into your newer concepts?
Um, how have lessons learned in
You could go
well,
from Berber and Q opening, or you could go from your first days as a commis chef.
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, done a lot of learning on the job. I mean, look, some people spend years running restaurants for other people before they open. I spent years in a kitchen, which may train you as a chef, doesn't necessarily train you to run restaurants. So, um, it was definitely a steep learning curve, and one where I think you learn the most from the mistakes that you make, and we've made lots of mistakes, thankfully none that have been fatal. But so sort of learned and evolved as a restaurant group. I feel I have as a restaurateur, and I'm trying to think about how specific mistakes. That the first site that we opened up was on a back street in Haggerston. Um, may not be a place that most people would think of as to where to put a restaurant. I think we managed to create a bit of hype and draw crowds to us, but I think you know location is important, footfall is important. Um, I think at the time that was where landlords wouldn't really speak to us when we were starting off because we were nobody, and it was kind of where we could get. But nowadays, would I take that site again? Probably not. And then we've just learned in terms of operationally what we look for, and how funnily enough, actually, I mean, I'm sure you'll cut these answers down, right?
Yeah.
But actually, a lot of that site operationally kind of just some restaurants you just open and they work, and others can cause you all sorts of problems and teething problems. And that was one of the sites, even though it was our first one, that just we opened it, everything just seemed to sort of work with the space, worked really well, in terms of operationally. It's all in one space, the kitchen, it's all open plan. I think we look for that now when we do restaurants. But I think location is a big one. Price point,
Yeah.
and really having a very tight sort of business model and working out very carefully exactly how many people you can expect to do at what price versus your costs and your expenses. When we opened, I'm not sure really. I can't remember that far back, but whether we were doing any, we just had an idea and we just kind of opened a restaurant. Sounds pretty amateur. I think if it sounds amateur, it probably is because it was quite amateur. But I think a lot of people start out that way. They just kind of open and they see how they go and how they get on. And the rent was low enough that, we weren't under that sort of pressure that some restaurants are. We've definitely grown as a group to sort of take on meteor sites. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Did I
Does
answer
indeed.
this?
Yeah, perfect sense. Perfect sense. So, where is the most surprising / unexpected place your career has taken you to?
I think that would probably be I met the president of Iceland, which
How'd that come
I
about?
went to like his house in. That was like a kind of moment where you just kind of just do a like snap with your eyes to try and capture the moment, because I was in like, I mean, it's really amazing, the president of Iceland, that how little security and how like informal the whole experience was. But I cooked at a food and fun festival. I was invited to go and cook at the food and fun festival in Iceland, and as part of that, all the chefs get to go and meet the president of Iceland. And so I think that was probably one moment where I was just like, this is a pretty crazy. I think when I started all those years ago, if you'd have told me it would take me to Iceland's president's house, I wouldn't have believed you. But certainly that was one of the craziest. I mean, look, we've cooked in all sorts of funny locations and at festivals, and I've been fortunate enough to go to various spots around the world and do what we do. But yeah, that was probably right up there.
So, what would you say is your favourite restaurant in London that's not a venture of your own?
I get asked that question a lot, actually, and I always feel like just I, I, I find it difficult to pick out because there's so many good restaurants, and I feel bad singling out one. I think one that I keep going back to, which is probably quite a well-trodden answer, but or used by a lot of people, but I happen to love Brawn on Columbia Road. Um, that ticks a lot of boxes for me. It's a beautiful dining room. The food is always delicious. Service is always on point. It's informal. You feel like you're spoiling yourself, but you can go there wearing whatever you want, and great wine. It just, it can be for anything. It can be for a casual Tuesday or Wednesday night dinner where you want to have something a little bit nicer, but it can also be celebratory or for a special occasion. And there's a few places like that. you know, in that ilk, Weston's Laundry, Prima. Actually, one of the owners or founders was he was a sous chef at Galvin Bistro, Dave Gingell, when I was a commie. And I love both of his restaurants, Weston's Laundry and Prima. They're of a similar ilk to Braun, a beautiful dining room, lovely food, elevated without feeling too stuffy or too formal, good for any occasion. Those are the kind of things that I look for.
So, how do you see the industry evolving over the next 10 years?
Well, I mean, this has been a challenging few years for the industry. I think that started with Brexit, and not a lot of people think of that, but for me, there was a lot of uncertainty created by Brexit, and then into the pandemic. You know, we've come out of it, and there's been a whole load of other pressures on the industry, and this budget, you know, hasn't helped. So it feels like we keep having stuff hurled in our direction. How it evolves, I don't know. Challenging little period. I think the first thing is to get past this budget in April, and you know, I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on a lot of restaurants. And unfortunately, I think the only solution that I can see is that prices are going to have to go up, and customers are going to have to get comfortable with the idea that, you know, prices are going to go up. And people are going to have to come up with solutions and improvise to find ways around it, because this budget has made a challenging and difficult industry, you know, even harder.
Is there a move to different kind of concepts that you see?
I think that, yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know at this juncture. I think, look, I think there's going to be more. I think you've seen it already. This working from home means that people are in the offices less. There's less sort of corporate sort of lunching. Lunch is proving more and more challenging for hospitality. And I've seen a lot more sort of grab and go concepts. I mean, they've been around for a long time, but I think at lunchtime we've seen a lot of the grab and go being popular options, because people aren't spending that many days in the office, so they don't have time for longer lunches. So I think these sort of quicker, fast, casual concepts, you might see an emergence. Well, they've already emerged, but more of them coming around. Yeah, evolution of the industry, I don't know.
In general terms, what are
Yeah.
your plans for the future?
Plans for the future, very much to sort of take stock for a little while,
Yeah.
to see how things play out over the next 6 months, 12 months. Like I say, in previous answers, I think we've been hurled a few obstacles in our way. So I think now's not the time for any sort of grand. Well, we don't have. Some people might have grand plans but we're just going to take stock for a little while and see what happens. So yeah. In terms of operationally, we've got our 4 restaurants. They're keeping me busy, and keeping me busy and out of trouble. And we're just going to wait to see how things play out with the budget before we, you know, I got a load of ideas. I always have like this sort of conveyor belt of ideas. I think some of them are becoming harder and harder to sort of work commercially, but yeah, I feel like I'm not getting great answers out of these last few questions.
It's great. No, it's great. It's great. This is more about just kind of meeting the person behind the concept than it is actually getting the answers
Right.
for it. Yeah, it's fine. Well, look, thanks very much for doing
Cool.
that. That is really, really
Nice
good.
one.